you don't pay attention, you don't get one.
I want one.
Okay.
I think that's food.
Alright.
Is it churros?
Yes.
Sure, just.
So we're gonna be Mexican Mythbusters today. Yay! Alright. We are going to start. I'm going to introduce you. This is our main guy. His name is Tío Pepe. And what I'm going to do is basically tell you what Tío Pepe would say at the Mexican dinner table about certain issues that involve America and Mexico. And I'm going to see if there's some sort of middle ground between what he says and what the U.S. media says. So, first things first. Taco Bell is not Mexican food, right? That awesome burrito that you guys love to eat, not Mexican. Cheddar cheese, someone here really likes cheddar cheese, not Mexican.
I love cheddar.
Sour cream and whatever, not Mexican either. This is a real Mexican taco. We call them tacos a la barbacoa. You've got your meat, you've got your cilantro, you've got your onion, and you've got your limes. We don't use lemons. Lemons are for whips. Now, you can get one of those for 70 cents at your local taqueria. So you can technically get like 3 tacos for 70 cents, which is really cheap. This is called chiles en nogada. It's my favorite and one of the most typical Mexican dishes because it's red, white, and green, which is our colors in case you haven't noticed already by the theme. It's really, really good. Don't ask me how to make it because I don't understand cooking. Okay, so now that you've paid attention to the most important point, we're going to go on to the less important stuff. Tío Pepe would say the drug war and the drug trafficking is the U.S.'s fault, right? Because you guys are the consumers of all the drugs, and you guys provide all the guns, because there is no, they don't allow gun possession in Mexico, right? And he'd also say that the U.S. should do more to fight the drug war, because it's the U.S.'s fault. So, how factually based is Tío Pepe? First, we have to talk about the like, overview. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with it. So, we have these drug cartels, and they've been around for a really, really long time. A lot of people have a misconception that it just started recently, and it's really not true. The reason why the violence has been so extreme in the past couple of years is because Mexican politicians have finally started doing something about it. There used to be a political party called the PRI, the PRI, that used to be in charge, and there's a lot of, I guess, conspiracies, but not really, that government officials were involved in the drug trafficking. And they sort of had like negotiations with these drug cartels and these drug lords. So we kicked the PRI out, and now the ban is in. Felipe Calderon has been our current president for the past 4 years, and he starts to crack down on these drug cartels. And this is when the violence blows up. Because what the drug lords used to do would be to keep the violence, like the smaller crimes, in check. Because to them, the best thing possible was to have no violence, so that people weren't, like, media wouldn't be attracted to what they were doing, and they could just continue trafficking drugs to the U.S. without any problems. When Felipe Calderon started cracking down on the drug lords, then the violence egged up because not only are we trying to kill off different drug lords and different chiefs, but we're also, in attacking them, they're not controlling the smaller violence, which then causes the smaller violence to step up. So that's really the issue that's going on. And the problem is that the cartels make $30 billion a year, which is equal to the economy of a mid-sized Central American nation. They move marijuana, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine into the U.S., and they earn extra money from things like kidnapping and things like that. So they have a huge role in the economy and in politics, unfortunately. They've always been involved. There's a lot of government corruption. And now that most of the corrupt officials have been exposed, what they're doing is they're just killing off all the government officials who try to go against them. So it's a really, really big problem. And essentially there are people who are just kind of stuck trying to fight the drug traffickers, but also trying to keep the violence down. And it's a problem, clearly. But another problem that we have is that, well, Americans consume $65 billion worth of illegal drugs annually. $65 billion is equivalently what we should be spending on higher education. So here comes Heidi's PubSpeak. If we weren't spending $65 billion on illegal drugs, we might have more money for education. Most of these drugs are either produced in Mexico or transit through it. And the U.S. is also a primary source of the weapons the cartels use to unleash the mayhem. So the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives estimates that 70% of the guns seized in Mexico in the past 2 years were smuggled from north of the border. So a lot of people aren't aware of that, but the illegal trafficking goes both ways. Tío Pepe, I don't know, I don't think he's right. However, there is stuff going on, and the issues that we have are serious because civilians in Mexico have become complacent about the narcos. Like, you talk to my cousins and they're like, oh yeah, we don't go to that club because that's where all the drug lords' children go. And I'm kind of like, well, why don't they stop the drug lords' children or the drug lords or whatever? And they're just like, oh no, because it's like bees. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you. And then that comes in with another misconception that U.S. media sort of exaggerates this idea of people are getting decapitated every single day, and there's like crazy violence, and if you step out of the airport, you're going to get shot. That's not what's happening. What's really going on is that the people who are dying are involved, and usually it's farmers who can barely pay for their own sustenance, and these drug lords come and they say, I want you to grow whatever in your farm. We'll pay you ridiculous, like more money than you've ever made in your life, which to them is really a minimal amount. They say yes, the drug lords get what they want, and they continue on. The second the farmer realizes that what he's doing is morally wrong and wants out because he's getting into a business that is really, really sketchy, drug trafficking, they kill him. So it's this issue of, do I do this so that I can have enough to feed for my family? Or do I not, but I will somehow or other be killed or at least ostracized from the community? So it's a very, very tough decision. And the solutions that they brought up, there's one that is actually very strong right now, which is legalizing marijuana, because it takes revenue from these drug lords that they're making off of like selling marijuana and things like that, and it provides like less necessity to control like marijuana trafficking now that it's, well, obviously marijuana trafficking, yes, but like it eases the police forces so that they can focus on bigger issues. And then another one was to fight corruption in police force and courts, which is very difficult right now because the police are not paid enough. It all goes down to the economy. They're not paid enough, so they're easily bribed. And it's estimated that Mexicans paid $2.75 billion in bribes to police and other officials last year, and 95% of violent crimes in Mexigo go unsolved. So in a country where most workers earn less than $10 a day, the cartels have little problem getting people to join them. And this is the main problem, and this is where this whole drug war stems from. So U.S. has given some aid, and they are working hard at it, but it's the solution is going to be long-term, and we need to fix a lot of little things before we can fix it. Alright, so yeah, those are pictures of that is representative of what a lot of different government officials in Mexico have started doing, which is negotiating with drug lords to just stop the violence. Like they're kind of saying, we will allow you to traffic these drugs here as long as you stop killing. And it's really heart-wrenching when you see the sort of things that goes on. But like I said, the innocent civilians, it's because they get caught in the crossfire. It's not because these drug lords and these these people involved with drug trafficking are going out and just randomly killing people. They're not. It's the smaller violent criminals who are starting to do that because the drug cartels are being cracked down on. So there's actually conspiracies that not Felipe Calderon, but the governor of Mexico, the state, because there's Mexico the country, there's Mexico the state, and then there's Mexico City, made negotiations where he allowed half of the state to like be open to the drug cartels so that they stem down the violence, and it's actually helped because Mexico City is one of the safest cities now in Mexico when it used to be the most criminal. Okay. Our next topic is the illegal immigration issue. Tío Pepe says illegal immigrants are the victims, not the criminals. He says that someone who barely makes enough money to sustain his family should have a right to go somewhere else and attempt to have a better life. I'm not going to get into the whole argument, because you've got the whole, what Speedy Gonzalez is saying. Those National Guard troops must be very speedy to catch me. I'll beat them to jobs, education, emergency room healthcare, and reduce college tuition. So that's the main argument on the other side, right? And then there's the argument where it's time to declare America from illegal immigrants. The Native American is saying, I'll help you out first. So, yes, legal immigrants are committing a crime. Now, those aren't. My issue is not, oh, we should open the borders to everyone, because that's a little bit ridiculous. My issues with this are the injustice of immigration quotas and policies in the U.S. and the discrimination and unfair treatment of illegal immigrants. Because what's going on is that there's sort of a double standard in immigration policy right now. You have the communist countries like China and Cuba, who, if you're a refugee from there, you usually get immediate refuge. At least in the wet-foot dry-foot policy, I know that if you're Cuban and you land on American soil, you're automatically granted refuge for a certain period of time, because you come from an enemy of the U.S., right? But then the argument is there are people starving in Mexico and Haiti who are actually dying, where there is no one dying in like communist countries. They have been under politically oppressed, but they're not actually dying of starvation, and they're not allowed refuge, and they're actually discriminated against because of it, and they're actually sent back. So it's a very iffy issue. Another thing is there are two main ways to get into the country, right? It's a family or work-based channel. And what's interesting is that the current wait time for a citizen to bring in a spouse or a young child is 7 years. And then while bringing in a sibling or adult child means on average a 22-year wait. So I personally know a lot of people who have come into the country and who are legal and have not seen their children for 10 years because they haven't gotten this approved. And it's something where you're kind of sitting there saying their 10-year-old child isn't being allowed into the country and they've been here waiting and just sending money back. It's a very difficult situation, and crossing the border is not easy either. People are risking their lives all the time. Okay. There's the work visa, where there are 140,000 work visa applicants allowed per year, with only 10,000 slots set aside for low-skilled labor. So this means that the people who are actually crossing the border illegally, which are the like manual laborers and the people who are going to work in agriculture and who are going to be most seen on the street or whatever in front of Home Depot, they're not being allowed to. They're only being allowed 10,000 slots of the 140,000. So then it becomes a socioeconomic issue too. We're only letting the rich people in, which makes sense because we're a capitalist society, so we want people who are going to contribute to this. But then there's also the idea of necessity and the idea of these people are dying, and a lot of these people live in these very, very dangerous communities and are trying to come over here for a better life, and they're not being allowed to. And they're not it's not easy for them to come over either. So yeah, like I said, the refugees from countries not at odds with the U.S. are not given refuge. Salvadorans fleeing the Civil War in the 1980s were immediately repatriated once they got there. And they were coming from a country filled with violence, and they were most likely going to be executed if they were sent back. But we were still sending them back because El Salvador was not at odds with the U.S. Haiti, people who fled after the coup in 1991, were incarcerated in concentration camps and repatriated. So there's this whole double standards in immigration policy. And immigration policy, I read in the No One Is Illegal book that you guys have seen me reading, it's always been set around capitalism. Like when labor is needed, we'll open the borders up, and then when labor is not needed, we'll just kick them all out. And it's happened multiple times. And it's this idea of deportation that gives this capitalist class control over worker mobility. So, for example, I own a very, very large agricultural farm in Arizona. and I'm going to hire a bunch of illegals. I have the whole deportation card to like raise over their heads, so I can make the working conditions as grimy and ugly as I want them to be, and they can't say anything about it, because if they say anything about it, I'll just kick them out of the country. So it's a very, 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 very iffy subject. The discrimination and unfair treatment of illegal immigrants right by the border is actually even worse, because we have a dying rate of 4 people every 3 days. So casualties on the border have surpassed the number of people who perished in the World Trade Center attacks, and constitute 10 times the number of people who died attempting to climb over the Berlin Wall during the Cold War. Border militarization has not stopped migration. It has only imposed deadly rules upon it. So there are 2 things that I want to talk about quickly, because I have 5 minutes left. The Arizona SB 1070 bill. I think you guys are sort of familiar with it. It basically says that all aliens over the age of 14 who remain in the United States for longer than 30 days have to register with the U.S. government and have to carry registration documents in their possession at all times. So it means that my cousin who could be visiting as a tourist, who's 15, has to carry around certain papers at every single moment, because anyone can go up to her and be like, oh, you're illegal, and send her back home. The issue with this, it was passed, but the Supreme Court is still fighting with it, and it's there. I would read it out, but I'm pressed on time. The problem with this bill is this idea that you can lawfully stop or arrest someone when there's reasonable suspicion, and it's been argued that that doesn't necessarily create racial profiling, and there is actually stuff in the actual law that is written to prevent that. However, in the act, like once it's in play, racial profiling is one of the big issues that is actually going to happen, because then people are just going to start stopping you based on the way you look and on the way you speak and whether or not you have an accent, and they're going to ask you for papers, and you could have lived here for 8 years and they wouldn't have done that. Okay. Now, a happy point in the illegal immigration issue is the DREAM Act, which is a bill that would provide conditional permanent residency to certain illegal alien students who graduate from U.S. high schools who are of good moral character, arrived in the U.S. illegally as minors, and have been in the country continuously for at least 5 years prior to the bill's enactment. Now, I'm really pro for this because it wasn't their choice to cross the border illegally and therefore commit a crime. They were brought over by their parents. They were under 15 years of age, and they shouldn't have to leave their home, where they've been living for the past 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, maybe even 20 years, because their parents chose to do this, right? So this would say we are going to give them a 6-year residency and then easier opportunity to get U.S. citizenship. And I know a lot of illegal immigrants who are my age who would be very, very thankful of this class. Now, most important. Mexico is home to the most beautiful women in the world. Dio Pepe says this, and I must say I completely agree. We have Selena Gomez, we have Salma Hayek, we have Paulina Rubio, and then, if that doesn't convince you, Miss Universe of 2011 was, guess who? Miss Mexico. Okay. So we've got 4 beautiful women, and then of course the 5th, the most beautiful. Alright, I'm done.